So I wanted to add just like a quick part two to this because I wanted to find this video in the last video I made. It's kind of like a PS, but I found the video launch a Carnegie Climate Geo Engineering Governance Initiative, and clearly not many people know about it because there's only 717 views, and it came out 2 years ago. Meanwhile, I'm sure Taylor Swift's new video has 5 million. Actually, that's probably an understatement, bitch. Anyway, now the shit is an hour and a half long, and we're not gonna watch the whole thing. I just want to like talk. I want to fast forward to
Do
one of
we
the main parts that this guy was talking about, who is so full of shit. I could just slap him.
It's ideally one
Let's play it back.
There a carbon load, that's something humanity has never spoken about.
industrial at an option. We absolutely have to cut our carbon emissions as aggressively as possible. None of these other ideas change that. The issue with that is simply if we could cut our carbon emissions fast enough to avoid dangerous climate change, then we don't really need to talk about these other options. But if you add up all of the commitments that were made in the Paris Agreement in 2015, that will get us to a world that's probably of order 3 degrees warmer than pre-industrial, 3 degrees Celsius. And in the Paris Agreement, it also basically laid out a threshold of 1.5, ideally 1.5, but definitely less than 2 degrees as a threshold for dangerous change. So the question then is, what do you do with that gap?
It just looks like he's full of shit.
And obviously the first step is to look and say if we can close that gap by being more aggressive in cutting emissions. But I think we have to actually recognize that it's plausible that we won't get there. So carbon dioxide removal, those technologies from a climate science perspective, you know, if you didn't put the CO2 in or if you put it in and then take it out, that pretty much looks the same. So there's no climate risk there.
What?
The issues with
What are
those
you saying?
technologies are primarily that they are hard to scale up and they're expensive. And the BECS that Simon mentioned, for example, to make a meaningful dent, you have to be pulling gigatons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere every year, or tens of gigatons. And so the issue with BECS is going to be things like land use, diverting land use away from food crops.
He looks like a skeleton. He's lying.
So the CO2 removal gives you sort of a long-term option of solving the climate problem, but over a time scale of generations. And the question then would be, if we find ourselves in a world that is at 3 or 4 degrees of warming, it is absolutely true that you could cool the planet by putting small particles, aerosols, up into the stratosphere. We know that by observing what happens after volcanic eruptions. Saying you could do that doesn't mean you should do that, but there's at least a plausible role there to say it's plausible that that lower path on that plot is less risky than allowing the climate to get to 3 or 4 degrees.
It's less risky. So that you're just going off of like speculation. Like, oh, maybe this is the less risk than letting the earth heat up and get hot. Bitch, the earth seems to be a living thing that knows what the fuck it's doing if it's been here longer than us. So who are we to really be like, oh we gotta do something. We've gotta like change the heat. We've gotta cool it down. Like, I get that we as fucking human beings have done shit to the planet, but this is like trying to control some shit that we cannot control. Sorry, I had to pause and think about that for a second. Because, I mean, we can control it. Because I'm sure I can hear people out there like, yes, we can, that's why we have been that, blah, blah, blah. But, yes, we can control it. But, not like this. This is not the way to go about it. Okay? I mean, we can cut harmful plastics and shit like that, yes. But unless motherfuckers is just about to stop driving cars altogether, it's not going to happen.
Degrees. And I would just say that purely as a plausibility issue, I don't know, for example, where the thresholds are where you destabilize enough Antarctic ice to cause 3 or 4 meters of sea level rise. But I would not be very confident in saying we'd avoid that at 3 or 4 degrees. It's quite plausible that if you cooled the planet back down to 1.5 or 2, that you might avoid some of those serious risks. So I don't think anybody would want to fight climate change by putting things in the stratosphere. It's just a question that it may be better off than not doing it.
Bitch. So nobody wants to do it, but it might be better off. Bitch, if you don't go jump your ass out the window right now with your old crypt keeper looking ass, I'm offended that you would even try to propose that to fucking human beings on this planet. You are a piece of shit, sir.
And where the research has gotten to date, purely in climate models, if you try this in climate models, then basically, yes, you reflect sunlight away, you will cool the planet, you'll cool the planet everywhere.
Look at her.
You do not quite compensate for if you warm the planet with CO2 and then you cool it with a different mechanism that doesn't bring you back to where you were. But the climate model results to date show that this is plausible. So as Simon mentioned,
it's plausible. The climate model today, which you only tested it in some fucking confined little contraption in some laboratory. Oh, I could slap this man.
There's basically two things in the space of solar geoengineering, primarily. One is put stuff in the stratosphere. It's not fundamentally hard to do. It's not fundamentally expensive. Basically, you fly airplanes up there and you dump a ton of sulfate. You cool the planet.
He just told you what they do. Fly planes up there, bunch of tons of sulfate.
If you really wanted to, you could probably do that a few years from now. Not saying that's a good idea.
Look, someone wasn't having it.
Without understanding it, it's definitely a bad idea.
And environmental issues, that's the only problem that I would have with that is if you're talking to anyone, ask them if they would like to.
I can't hear what she's saying, but she's not here for it.
Yeah. So let me just address that point right now, just a little bit. Is we currently dump about 100 megatons of sulfate into this. We as humanity.
Because I know I don't.
She said, "Because I know I
Thank you very
don't."
much. I'm sorry.
Also, thanks for the intervention from the floor, but maybe
Yeah, I
Look,
apologize.
that lady said, "Look, nigga, you ain't gonna sit up here and tell me that we're gonna dump this shit in the sky and then try to blame us and look, we already do as humans." And no, bitch, no, I don't. No, that's y'all doing that shit. And see, this little fucking Weasley ass man. Oh, it's little motherfuckers like him who just make me want to wring their neck.
So I'll just for context. Humanity currently puts about 100 megatons of sulfate into the atmosphere right now, into the lower atmosphere. If you put the sulfate higher into the atmosphere, it stays there longer, and we're talking about putting a relatively small amount. And I would agree absolutely, if your first reaction, having never heard this before, isn't, what a horrible idea, I'm concerned. But the second reaction is allowing the planet to get to 3 or 4 degrees is also a bad idea. And so it's a challenging question as to which winds up being better. So I'll stop with that.
I'll leave you on. Y'all want to let the planet heat up, or should y'all want to spray shit in the sky? He's the little ass man I just like to fuck up. And the YouTube might get me because it's like, oh, that's hate speech and that's blah 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 blah. But no, why are we letting people who these scientists, quote unquote, come up here and spit a bunch of bullshit and then try to scare us into, okay, we need to spray this shit into the skies. For what? So we don't let the fucking world heat up? Edward Teller. And it all goes back to motherfuckers like him. Look, he looked like he's probably related to this man. A Hungarian physicist, a Hungarian theoretical physicist. That means he should have been a conspiracy theory. He should have been crazy. Who is known colloquially as the father of the hydrogen bomb. This man is one of the people who is also involved with the whole climate shit, as is An American physicist. He was just American. The other one was Hungarian American. And so, look, connections to HARP. What was I saying about HARP in the last video? So, the shit is not that fucking hard to understand when we know what we're looking at, okay? This man's over here trying to sell us on some bullshit, and only 718 people have watched this. But I bet if I look at Billie Eilish right now, motherfuckers. 649 million versus 718. It went up one. Maybe I'm that one. I'm just so frustrated, and I'm frustrated in a way of people. Oh, we never even got to this guy. Yeah, I'm glad. Good. People want to sit up here and talking about fucking Donald Trump's impeachment. And all these people got subpoenaed and this, that, or the other. It's like, why are we not talking about what really matters? Like, this shit that you're breathing in every fucking single day really matters. Now, if you're a cigarette smoker out there, then you probably don't give a fuck because you're already killing yourself every time you step out and light that motherfucker up. So maybe I'm not really talking to y'all. I'm talking to the ones who want to be healthy and care about what their children and their future generations might have to deal with. Okay, so if you got feelings and that probably are anti all this shit, ask yourself, do you smoke cigarettes? Because if you do, that probably is going to just cut you out this conversation altogether, because you already on some other shit. You're polluting yourself in a whole bunch of other ways. And that's not no shame and nothing like that. But I mean, how can you really be about caring what's in the atmosphere if you already fucking putting shit in your body that's foreign? So,
engineering is a method to counterbalance the effects of global warming owing to the increased concentrations of atmospheric greenhouse gases. Geoengineering or climate engineering generally falls into two specific categories. The first of which is called carbon dioxide removal, which, as the name suggests, is basically capturing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it. The second method is what's known as solar radiation management. Now, solar radiation management differs from carbon dioxide removal in that what you're trying to do is reflect an additional amount of sunlight back out to space. So solar radiation management is basically trying to reflect sunlight back out to space, leading to a cooling to counterbalance the increases in greenhouse gases. There's been various different solar radiation management schemes that have been mooted as being possible, all of which are basically trying to reflect sunlight back out to space. One of the most popular is to inject some reflective material into the stratosphere. This mimics really the impact of volcanic eruptions, which have been shown on the observational record to cool climate. There's another method which is artificial brightening of low-lying stratocumulus clouds. If you inject some aerosol into these low-lying stratocumulus clouds, you can brighten them. And of course, when you get a brightening of the planet, you're reflecting more sunlight back out to space. Those are the two most popular solar radiation management techniques that are in the press at the moment. Carbon dioxide removal is often thought of as a relatively benign kind of geoengineering because you're simply reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's not quite as simple as that because a lot of the land that would be used for general agricultural practices like they are at the moment would have to be converted into land for specific growing of biomass burning. So there's certainly some ecological implications that are associated with CDR. Solar radiation management, the main conclusions that are coming out of the solar radiation management studies is that you cannot get a no temperature change Earth, no global mean net temperature change, without there being some regional side effects. So although you can hold the temperature of the Earth fixed at, say, present-day conditions, you will get regional responses in both temperature. For instance, the poles will warm up more than the equator, And you also get impacts on precipitation.
So boom. What is geoengineering? And so like we should be having these conversations, but no one is. But yes, I just want to end it on that. I mean, all this shit's connected, even the 5G, but that's a whole nother shit for a whole nother video. Yeah, geoengineering. The shit's happening. You should ask questions. That should be one of the topics of debate. Listen, I'm gonna end it on this note. In this 2020 debate, if geoengineering and what's being sprayed in the skies is not a topic of conversation, if it's not in the ballots, or if there's not a political candidate that is mentioning it in the mainstream news, if it's not in the mainstream news, I will not vote. Period.